Bill McCartney today, who is a legend and a veteran in the real estate industry. And we're fortunate enough to have you in your advice. There's a lot of questions out there about real estate. There always are, but specifically right now in 2025, new president, economy's going wild. Depends on, which side. But we thought we'd bring the guru in today and talk to us about, absolutely. I know you've closed and managed and been a designated broker, and you serve clients in the Phoenix and Scottsdale and Paradise Valley and Arcadia areas. So in my opinion, we talked about it off camera. I owned a mortgage and real estate company. Mm-hmm. I always sought after the gurus, and that's you, somebody that has that knowledge. Commissions in real estate, I know we can't talk about, especially in the new atmosphere, but generally, most real estate agents get about the same commission. If I'm buying or selling my $3 million home, I'm calling you because you know what you're doing, you have the experience. So I'd love to touch on that briefly, and we'll talk about what's happening in the market.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about commissions, and, yes, we can't price fix from broker to broker, like industry-wide.
Okay.
And I think the commission rates are probably relatively similar, regardless of the level of experience that an agent has.
I would agree.
But you do see some varying degrees of compensation.
Okay.
So it's, I think maybe it's a misnomer that there's a standard commission rate, because there really isn't.
Okay. Yeah, and that's more and more so recently. But again, as I had clients in the past, and maybe you have the same opinion, maybe different, I'd love to hear your slant. I always tell my clients, you can work with, A real estate agent or B real estate agent, and A has just got out of real estate school and is maybe younger and inexperienced, or you can work with, again, a professional that's been around and seen thousands of transactions. Again, I'm going to pick you every time because of your knowledge, experience, negotiating a contract, whether I'm selling my home or buying a home. So what are the different angles? Because a lot of people out there don't know the differences of experience for real estate agents in years. So picking a veteran like you is the bright thing to do.
Well, I would believe that as well, but I respect everybody gets to start somewhere.
Sure.
So sometimes those newer agents, they have a team lead, or they have a little bit more oversight from their broker. So they do have that support. Sure. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you're really looking for that person who's experienced and you want the best experience for yourself,
absolutely,
having somebody who is a veteran, understands the market, knows what to do, knows how to handle some difficult situations or even conversations, can help you to save that transaction or even put more money in your pocket.
Absolutely. There's a real quick example that just popped into my head. A friend of mine and I own a home up in Paradise Valley, investment property we bought years ago.
Sure.
We split it. We just sold it the other day. I can't even believe it was just a little under $2 million, which I didn't even think there were homes
That's
still.
on the low side.
Very, very, very low side. And an issue came up right near closing where there was literally a sinkhole under the house.
Wow.
That could cause a very, 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 very big problem. And, we were negotiating back and forth. Fortunately, we had an excellent real estate agent like yourself.
Yeah, that's good.
That could negotiate it. And how it ended in a long, long, long conversation and all kinds of paperwork and texts and emails. Hey, the buyer said, hey, give me negotiated it down from $105,000 down to $68,000 and said, I'll deal with it. Otherwise, that was going to be multi months worth of, this could happen, that could happen, right?
Engineers.
So it wound up real quick. We were happy. They were happy. They got a beautiful home. They can do a lot of things with it. So that's the kind of experience that someone like yourself brings to the table that is priceless.
Absolutely. And it's funny, too, because when you talk to the consumer, especially like a seller as an example, they'll say, all right, well, I'm looking for an agent. Maybe they hire 3 agents. And I find that they feel like they want to hire the agent that's going to give them the highest price for the house and the lowest commission. So it's really important to kind of look at, what's the background of that agent? What is their skill set? What is their track record of performance, before making that decision? Because if you make an emotional decision, which is very, very much a thing within the real estate business, particularly on the residential side, people can make those bad decisions because it's an emotional decision.
Absolutely. And how do you get them to get out of that bad decision?
Great question. And that's really, it comes down to education.
Yeah.
So when I sit down with the seller, I explain what it is we're going to review. I ask if they have any questions along the way, of course. But I want them to understand, how does the market work? How does positioning your property in the market work? And how does it impact your ability to sell or not sell the property? As well as how you can, effectively create an opportunity where you're putting yourself in a situation to get the best price, terms, and conditions for the sale of that property.
Yeah.
So it's an educational process for them, and hopefully they understand that, they see it, they can relate to it.
Yeah.
And more often than not, fortunately, they've hired me because of that, I think.
But absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I see you interviewing if a potential client is going to interview 3 or 4 or 5 real estate agents. I think you're going to win 99% of the
Well,
time.
I
Just
appreciate that.
because of everything you've done, your success, your knowledge. You've seen it, done it, been there.
Right.
Cool, calm, and collect, and know how to negotiate a contract, which there's a lot of moving parts. I think most prospective clients don't understand.
Sure.
You and I do on this side. It's like the brain surgeon. Again, one of our kids had to go into brain surgery. They got in a car accident. Would we want that surgeon, if given a choice, it was his or her very first brain surgery or their 10,000th?
Right.
Right? And so that's how I see you as a professional that's been around and knows how to negotiate in the high end. So that to me is priceless. And I know you can't forecast the market, but so we're here in March 2025. And everybody's curious about, hey, where are interest rates going? What's going to happen with the economy? I know you don't have a crystal ball. What's kind of some of your gut feelings about the big picture, macroeconomy, inventory? I know that's important.
That's
scarcity.
Big story lately.
Yeah.
Is the inventory. And I think it's kind of causing people to feel like, is the market going to crash? What's happening? It's creating a little bit of, I guess, uneasiness about just where the market is and where it's going. So, to really take a look at that, what we've seen is the inventory has increased really quickly over the last 6 months.
Okay.
Today, we're at about 26,000 homes in the market.
Okay.
As of the end of March 2025. But when you look at the market overall, it's important to see it from a supply side and demand side relationship.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's the month's supply of inventory that we're looking at. And that in itself will help you to determine, are we in a declining market, an appreciating market? Is the market flat? And right now, we've gotten to a point, and I think it's a really good thing for everyone.
Okay.
We've gotten to a point of where we're balanced.
Okay.
So we're seeing more balance within the market, which is really, really good. I think it's healthy for buyers because, let's face it, from 2020 through 2022, so those 3 years, they saw a constant double-digit appreciation and a real scarcity of homes, which is why you had that appreciation. Now that we've kind of leveled off with the interest rates that have doubled, since that point in time, you're seeing, the values have dropped a little bit. And I don't think people really realize that because they're just looking at the median sales price.
Okay.
But values have dropped a little bit, and then they leveled off for a period of time. And there's been some, slight appreciation.
Yeah.
But now that we're back at a point where we have 26,000 homes on the market, it's creating an opportunity for buyers to negotiate terms and conditions that are now favorable to them.
Okay, on the
So they
buyer
can
side.
finance their closing costs.
Perfect.
And just to give you an example, so far from January 1st, we have about 47% of all transactions had a seller concession
Okay.
for closing costs.
Closing costs or rate buy downs?
Yeah,
Or
you can use it for whatever you'd like.
Some prospective clients don't know that. They can do a rate buy down with some of those, the seller concessions. So great time if you're in that kind of leveraged position as a buyer to get a rate buy down or closing costs or both possibly.
Yeah. So, and now like those terms maybe 3-4 years ago wouldn't be as good as somebody with, high down payment and cash, especially with appraisal concerns. Today that's changed. And the median concession that we're seeing from sellers is about $10,000.
Okay. $10,000.
So
Wow.
what people don't look at either is like if you look at the sales price and the median sales price and you look at what the seller's netting, because these concessions have increased, because now sellers are in a position where they have to kind of say, hey, I'll give you, some money towards closing costs so you can buy down that rate, makes your affordability a little bit better. They get a better offer. The buyer gets a better deal in a sense, So that's been kind of maintaining the values in terms of the median sales price a bit. Once you factor that in, sellers are actually getting a little bit less than they would have maybe a year or two ago.
Yeah, and it makes sense. It makes sense. Do what you have to do to sell the home, and instead of lowering the price, which I know statistically in industry, when the house goes up for sale, it's a great time to buy.
Sure.
And then the longer, days on market is something that real estate agents and potential buyers look at, right? DOM,
Absolutely.
days on market. If a home's been on the market 146 days, 292 days, what does that tell the other agents that might be buying or their clients? Is it?
Well, here's the funny thing, right? So a few years ago when we had this hot market, if our house was on the market for like 3 weeks, a buyer would be like, what's wrong with it? Because like they'd have multiple offers out of the gate and, people were tripping over themselves to purchase that home. Today, the average days on market's about 74 days.
Okay, that's relevant
so
for our
very
clients to know. 75 days, so over 2 months.
But here's the thing. It really depends on your strategy. And
Okay.
to your point, and this is statistically proven, I show every seller, it's part of my conversation on pricing and positioning, show every seller what's happening and the result of the possibility of overpricing your house and what that means, because time is not on your side when your house is on the market. And more than 50% of all the homes sold sell within the first 60 days. Close to 30% of them will sell within the first 30 days.
Okay.
The way that I work with my clients is I say, listen, you get one chance to make a good first impression. If you're on the market for 2 days,
Absolutely.
what's the buyer's perception of the value of that property?
Yeah.
They're like, well, it's a must-see.
Yeah.
We got to see it.
Yeah.
And then if they like it, because it's
brand new and
positioned
fresh.
properly,
Right? Somebody's going to snatch it up if we don't, honey. Let's get over to that
They're
house.
all looking for the new inventory.
Yeah.
If it's
Okay.
it's like last month, that's like old stuff, right? So they all want the new inventory. And, the buyer's perception of that property is very different at 2 days than it is at 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. And it's funny because when I sold our own personal property in New York, and today everybody's got Ring door cameras and things like that, right? So the agent goes outside with her client,
Okay.
and I have a camera, so it's recording their conversation.
Oh, wow.
So any seller out there really needs to be conscious of this. Any buyer needs to be conscious
Nobody
of
talks
this.
about that point you just brought
Yes,
up.
it's really, really important. And, you have to also follow the laws regarding recordings and things like that, right? Which
Wow.
vary from state to state. But what this buyer said to their agent was, they asked the question, how long has it been on the market? And now New York's a little bit different in terms of the way the contract works.
Okay.
So the list date was about 30 days prior. Maybe it was like 25, 30 days, right? So the buyer goes, well, then maybe they'll be a little bit negotiable on the price. Meanwhile, I had $30,000 higher than asking.
Oh, really?
But the buyer's perception is very different depending on the time on the market. And the other thing to consider is that statistically, from your list price to the sales price, they call it the list to sales price ratio.
Yeah.
Within 30 days, you're typically at like 98%.
Okay.
From 30 to 60, you kind of drop down to like 97, maybe 96.
Not an awful lot.
No,
But
it's, at $500,000.
Sure.
1% is $5,000.
Yeah.
2% is $10,000.
And it's
right?
a multi-million-dollar home. It's a big difference.
Exactly. Yeah, even larger. So once you get to that 60 to 90 days, 90 to 120, the buyer's perception of value and the list to sales price ratio drops significantly.
Significantly.
So that's why, I'll share that with a potential client to show them and illustrate the
Yeah.
importance of proper
That's
pricing.
Critical. Pricing
really
it
is.
properly up front is
Absolutely.
critical.
Yeah, put it this way, I'm in the business more than 20 years. So I've seen the market in 08, and 09, and 2010.
Yeah.
This is when we had, you think 26,000 properties is a lot?
Yeah.
There were like 60,000 properties on the market at
Yeah.
one time. So more than twice of what we have today.
Yeah.
Maybe more than a year's supply. So think about what you'd have to do as a seller to sell your property at that point. It's a daunting task. However, what we found is that you can create that seller's market even in the buyer's market just based on the proper positioning. And that's a strategy that I don't force on my clients, of course,
Yeah.
but it's a strategy that I discuss with them as well as where I think market value might be.
Absolutely.
But overpriced doesn't work.
Yeah,
It never
definitely
works.
not. But that's where your time in the industry and your success and being in the trenches, serving clients,
Sure.
being in administration and owning and or running the company as a designated broker, you've got the whole angle. You know the exact numbers. So again, I'm a little bit biased. I know you wouldn't say this, but to me, if I'm going to hire a real estate agent and I've got a choice of all of them,
Right.
I'm going to go with a professional like yourself that knows the industry inside and out, knows how to negotiate a contract, whether on the buy side or the sell side.
Yeah.
Your experience is absolutely priceless.
And I'm biased as well, so I would too.
Exactly.
Right.
What's the best way to get in touch with you? If somebody's going to see this video on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, it's funny. I just had this conversation with an agent in Kansas yesterday because I called her and she's like, she answers the phone. Hello? Okay. Because every time you get a phone call today, people are worried. But
Yeah.
you can call me and I always have to answer my phone, even though we get a ton of scam calls.
Yeah.
So, you can definitely give me a call. That's fine. You can email, text, whatever your preferred method of communication is.
Do you have a website or a phone number that you wouldn't mind
so
sharing?
phone number is 480-463-4778.
Okay.
And then the website is themccartneyteam.com.
TheMcCartneyTeam.com.
Correct.
And you get Bill McCartney at the top, the Sherpa at the top of the mountain.
There you go.
I appreciate your time, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.